Hi, this is Dana Gardner, Principal Analyst at Interarbor Solutions, and you're listening to BriefingsDirect. Our next Innovation Thought Leadership panel discussion focuses on the heightened role of security in the age of global cloud and mobile delivery of apps and data. As enterprises and small to medium-sized businesses alike weigh the balance of apps' convenience with security, a new dynamic is emerging. Security concerns increasingly dwarf other architecture considerations. Yet advances in thin clients, desktop virtualization, cloud management services, and mobile delivery networks are allowing both increased security and edge applications performance gains. To learn more about end-to-end security for apps and data, please join me in welcoming our panel. We're here with Stan Black, the Chief Security Officer at Citrix. Welcome, Stan.
Thank you very much for having me.
We're also here with Chad Wilson, Director of Information Security at Children's National Health System in Washington, D.C. Hi, Chad.
Hi, thank you.
Whit Baker joins us. He's with the Watershed in Delray Beach, Florida. What's your title there, Whit?
I'm the IT Director at the Watershed.
The IT Director. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
And we're also here with Craig Patterson, CEO of Patterson Associates in San Antonio, Texas. Welcome, Craig.
Thank you very much.
And lastly, Dan Kaminsky joins us. He's the Chief Scientist at White Ops in San Francisco. Welcome, Dan.
It's an honor and a pleasure.
Stan, let's start with you. A first major use case of virtual desktop technology was the stateless client. All the data and apps remain on the server, sort of locked down, controlled. But now data is mobile, and we're all mobile. So how can we take security on the road, so to speak? How do we move past the good state of VDI to full mobile but not lose our security control?
I think that probably the largest challenge we all have is maintaining consistent connectivity. We are now able to keep data locally or make it highly extensible, whether it's delivered through the cloud or a virtualized application. So it's a mix and a blend. But from a security lens, each one of those service capabilities has a certain nuance that we need to be cognizant of while we are trying to protect data at rest, in use, and in motion.
Now, I heard you speak earlier today about bring your own. And for you, bring your own devices have ended up being more secure than company provided devices. Why do you think that is?
Well, frankly, the term we use is if you own the car, you tend to take care of it. When you have a BYO asset, you tend to take care of it because ultimately you're going to own that, whether it's purchased for you with a retainer or what have you. Often corporate issued assets are like a car rental. You might not bring it back the same way you took it. Mm-hmm. So it's really changed quite a bit, but the containerization gives us the ability to provide as much, if not more, control in that BYO asset.
And this also, I think, points up the importance of behaviors and end-user culture and thinking about security, acting in certain ways. Let's go to you, Craig. How do we get that benefit of behavior and culture as we think more about mobility and security?
I think when we talk about behavior and culture, when we look at mobile, we've had people who would have a mobile device out in the field and they're accustomed to being able to take an email. And that email may have, in our situations, private information, social security numbers, certain client IDs on it, things that we really don't want out in the public space. And the culture has been, take a picture of the screen, text it to someone else. Now it's in another space. And that private information is out there. And the culture has been, you go from working in a home environment where you text everything back and forth to now you've got secure information that needs to be containerized, shrink wrapped, and not go outside a certain control parameter for security. And now you're having culture fight utilization, where people are accustomed to using their devices in one way, and now they have to learn a different way of using devices with a secure environment and wrapping, and that's what we're running into.
Mm-hmm. Well, we also have heard here at Citrix Synergy 2016 in Las Vegas that IT should be able to say yes, that it's an important part of getting better productivity. Dan, how do we get people to behave well in secure terms, but not maybe say no? Is there a carrot approach to this? Is there an encouragement approach to people thinking about better security postures?
Absolutely. At the end of the day, like, our users are going to go ahead and do do stuff. They need to get their jobs done. I always laugh when people are like, I can't believe that person opened a PDF from the internet. They work in HR. Their job is to open resumes. If they don't open resumes, they're going to lose their job and be replaced by someone else. The thing I see a lot of is just a lot of these software as a service providers being pressed into service to provide the things that people need. And it's kind of like a rogue IT or an outsourced IT with or without permission. And kind of the unusual realization that I had is if we really, all these random partners we're getting, they have random policies, they're storing data. We hear a lot of stuff about the Internet of Things, but I don't know any toasters that have my social security number, okay? I know lots of these, DocuSign, HelloSign systems that are storing really sensitive documents. So what I think is maybe the solution, if we want people to implement our security technologies, or at least our security policies, is to pay them, is to offer them, hey, if you actually have attracted our users, follow these policies, we'll give you this amount of money per day, per user, automatically through our authentication layer. It sounds ridiculous, but you got to look at the status quo. The status quo is on fire. Maybe we can pay people to put out their fires.
Or perhaps there's other quid pro quos that don't involve money. Chad, you work at a large hospital organization, and you've mentioned here that you're 100% digital. How did you encourage people with the carrot to adhere to the right policies in a challenging environment like a hospital?
Well, quite honestly, we tended to throw out the carrot and stick philosophy and just build a new highway. So if you're driving on a 2-lane highway and it's always congested and you want somebody to get there faster, then build a new highway that can handle the capacity and can handle the security and build the right on and off ramps to it, and then cut over. So we've had an EMR implementation for a while. We just finished up rolling out to all of our ambulatory spaces a full electronic medical record, all delivered through virtualization on that highway that we built. So they have access to it wherever they need it.
It almost sounds like you're looking at the beginner bowlers approach, where you put rails up on the gutters, so you can't go too far afield, whether you wish to or not. Whit Baker, tell us a little bit about the watershed and how you view behavior. Is it rails on the gutters, carrots or sticks? How does it go?
I'd say rails on the gutters for us. We've completely converted everything to a VDI environment. So whether they're connecting with a laptop, with broadband, or their own home computer, or a mobile device, that session is completely bifurcated from their own operating system. So we're not really worried about, if your desktop machine can be completely loaded with malware and whatnot, but when you open that session, you are inside of our system. So that's basically how we handle the security. Our users, it almost doesn't require the users to be conscious of security. Now, at the same time, we are still afraid of attachments and things like that. And so we do educational type things, like when we see some phishing emails come in, I'll send out scam alerts and things like that to our employees, and they're starting to become self-aware. They're starting to go, hey, should I even open this? Those sort of things. So it's a little bit of containerization, giving them some rails that they can't bounce off of, and education.
Stan, back to you. Thinking about other ways that we can encourage good security posture in the mobility era, authentication certainly comes to mind, multi-factor authentication. How does that play into this, keeping people safe?
Well, it's a mix of how we're going to deliver the services, but it's also a mix of the behavior element and the fact that now technology has progressed so much that you can provide a user an entire experience that they actually enjoy. It gives them what they need inside of a secure session, inside of a secure socket layer, with the inability to go outside of those bowling lanes if they are not authorized to do so. Additionally, authentication technologies have come a long way from hard tokens that we used to wear. I've seen people with 4, 5, 6 of them all on one necklace. I think I might have been one of them. But multi-factor authentication, the user interface, these are all pieces of information that are not tied to the person's privacy or that individual, like their social security number, but it's their user experience enabling them to connect seamlessly. Often when you have a help desk environment, as an example, if you put a timeout on their system, they go from one phone call to another phone call, then they have to log back in. Well, the interfaces that we have now in the multi-factor authentication, the simple authentication, the simplified sign-on, all of those enable a person, depending upon what their role is, to connect into the environment they need to do their job quickly and easily.
You mentioned user experience. Maybe that's the quid pro quo. You get more user experience benefits if you take more precautions with how you behave using your devices. Dan, any thoughts on where we go with authentication and being able to say yes and encourage people to do the right thing?
So I cannot emphasize how important usability is into getting security wins. We've had some major ones. We moved people from Telnet to SSH. Telnet was unencrypted and was a disaster. SSH is encrypted and is actually the thing people use now. Because if you jump through a few hoops, you stopped having to type in a password. You know what VPNs meant? VPNs meant you didn't have to drive into the office on a Sunday. You could be at home and fix the problem, and hours became minutes or seconds. Everything that we do that really works involves making things more usable, enabling people, saying security is giving you permission to do this thing that used to be dangerous. I actually have a lot of hope in the mobility space because a lot of these mobile environments and operating systems are actually really quite secure. You hand someone an iPad, and in a year, that iPad is still going to work. There are other systems where you hand someone a device, and that device is not going to be doing so well a year from now. So there's a lot more controls and stability from some of these mobile things that people actually like to use more, and turn out to also be significantly more secure.
Craig, as we're also thinking about ways of keeping people on the straight and narrow path, we're getting more intelligent networks. We're starting to get more data and analytics from those devices, and we're being able to see what goes on in that network in high detail. Tell us a little bit about the ways in which we can segment and then make sort of zones for certain purposes that may come and go based on policies. Basically, how are intelligent networks helping us provide that usability and security?
The example that comes to my mind is in many of the industries, we have partners who come on site for a short period of time. They need access to data. They might be doing inspections for us, and they'll be going into a private area, but we don't want them to take certain photos, documents, and other information off-site after a period of time. I think by containerizing data and having, if you would, zones that allow a person to have access while they're on-prem within a certain, I'll call it electronic wire fence, if you will, or electronic guardrails. But once they go outside of that area, that data is no longer accessible, or they've been logged off the system and they no longer have access to those documents. We had a kind of an old-fashioned example where people think they're more secure because they don't know what they're losing. Where we had people with file cabinets that were locked and they had the key around their neck. And they said, why should we go to an electronic document system where I can see when you viewed it, when you downloaded it, where you moved that document to? That kind of scared some people until I walked in with half their file cabinet. And I said, you didn't even know these were gone, but you felt secure the whole time. Wouldn't you rather know that it was gone and have been able to institute some security protocols behind it? So I think a lot of it goes to, as was said before, usability. We want to make things usable. We have to have access to it. But at the same time, those guardrails include not only where we can access it and at what time, but for how long and for what purposes. We have mobile devices that we need to be able to turn the camera functions off in certain parts of our facility. And so for mobile device management, that's helpful. For BYOD, that becomes a different challenge, and that's when we have to handle giving them a device that we can control as opposed to BYOD.
Stan, another major trend these days is the borderless enterprise. We have supply chains, we have alliances, ecosystems that provide solutions, an API-first mentality. And so that requires us to be able to move outside and allow others to cross over. How does the network intelligence factor play into making that possible so that we can say yes and get a user experience regardless of which company we're actually dealing with?
The borderless concept, I agree with that. The interesting part of it, though, is with networks knowing where they're connecting to physically, the mobile device has over 20 sensors in it. When you take all of that information and you bring it together with whatever APIs are enabled in the applications, you start to have a very interesting set of capabilities we never had before. Simple example is if you're a database administrator and you're administering something inside the EU, there are very stringent privacy laws that make it so you're not allowed to do that. So we don't have to make it so we have to train the person or make it more difficult for them. We simply disable the capability through geofencing. And when one application is talking securely through a socket all the way to the back end, from mobile device all the way into the data center, you have pretty darn good control. And you can also separate duties. System administration being one function, whereas database administration is another. Very different things. One set doesn't see the private data. One set has very clear access to it.
Chad, you mentioned how visibility is super important for you and your organization. Tell me a bit about moving beyond the user implications. What about the operators? How do you all get that visibility and keep it? And how important is that to maintaining your security posture?
Well, I'll start with an example. If you can't see it, you can't protect it. And no matter how much visibility we get into the back end, if the end user does not adopt the application or the virtualization that we put in place or the highway that we built, then we're not going to see the end-to-end session. They're going to continue to do workarounds. So usability is very important to end-user adoption and adopting the new technologies and the new platforms. It has to be easy for them to access it, to use it. And then from the back end, the visibility piece, we look at adopting strategically technology, not just point products here and there to bolt them on. So a strategic innovation and a strategic procurement around technology and partnership, like we have with Citrix, allows us to have a consistent delivery of the application and the end user experience, no matter what device they go to and where they access from in the world. And on the backside, that helps us because we can have that end-to-end visibility of where our data is heading, the authentication right up front, as well as all the pieces and parts of the network that go into play to deliver that experience. So it's really, instead of thinking about things from a device to device to device perspective, we're thinking about one holistic service delivery platform, and that's the new highway that provides that visibility.
Whit, we've heard a lot about the mentality that you should assume someone's in your network. Monitoring and response is one way of limiting that. How does your organization, one, acknowledge that bad things can happen, but that you can limit that? And how important is monitoring and response for you in reducing damage?
In our case, we have several layers of user experience, and so through policy, we only allow certain users to do certain things. And we're a healthcare system, but we have various, medical people versus people in our corporate billing area, our call center, behavioral health techs, therapists, doctors. All of those different roles are basically looking only at the data that they need to be accessing. And through policy, it's actually fairly easy to do.
Stan, on the same subject, monitoring and response, assuming that people are in, what is Citrix seeing in the field, and how are you giving that response time as low a latency as possible?
Well, the standard incident response protocol is identify, contain, control, communicate. Well, we're able to shrink what we need to identify. We're able to connect from end to end, so we are able to communicate effectively. And we have changed how much data we gather regarding transmissions and communications. So if you think about it, what we've done is we've shrunk our attack surface, we've shrunk our vulnerable areas and methods or vectors by which people can enter in. At the same time, we have gained incredibly high visibility and fidelity into what is supposed to be going over a wire or wireless and what is not. So we are now able to shrink the identify, contain, control, communicate spectrum to a much shorter area and focus our efforts with really smart threat intelligence and incident response people versus everyone in the IT organization, everyone in security, everyone's looking at the needle in the haystack. Now we just have a smaller stack of needles.
Craig Patterson?
Yeah, I had a thought on that because as we looked at a cloud-first strategy, one of the issues that we looked at was, okay, we've got a voice-over-IP system in the cloud. We've got Azure. We've got Citrix. We've got our NetScaler. Okay, what about our firewalls now, and how do we actually monitor intrusion? And we've got file attachments now coming in emails that are coming through in ways that aren't on our on-prem firewall and not with all our malware detection. And so those are questions that I think all of us are trying to answer because now we're creating known unknowns and really unknown unknowns. And when it happens, we're going to go, well, we didn't know that part could happen. And I think that that's where part of the industry is at too. And I think that Citrix and Microsoft are helping us with that in our environments. But those are still open questions for us. We're not satisfied with the answers entirely yet.
Dan, one of the other ways that we want to be able to say yes to our users and increase their experiences as workers is to recognize the heterogeneity, any cloud, any device, multiple browser types, multiple device types. How do you see the ability to say yes to vast heterogeneity, perhaps at a scale we've never seen before, but at the same time preserve that security and keep those users happy?
You know, the reason why we have different departments and multiple teams is because different groups have different requirements. They have different needs that are satisfied in ways that we don't necessarily understand. It's not the heterogeneity that bothers us. It's the fact that a lot of systems have different risks, and to the degree to which we can merge their risks or simultaneously address them with consistent technologies like containerization and virtualization, like these sort of centralization solutions out there. People are sometimes afraid of putting all their eggs in one basket. You know, I'll take one really well-built basket over 50,000 totally broken ones. So what I see is create environments that users can use whatever makes their job work best, and go ahead and realize that it's not actually the fact that their risks are that distinct, that they're that unique. The risk patterns of the underlying software are less diverse than the software themselves.
Stan, a similar question. Most organizations that we speak to say they have at least 6, perhaps more clouds. They're using all sorts of new devices. You've just come out yourselves to allow Raspberry Pi at less than $100 to be a viable Windows endpoint. How do we move forward and keep the options open for any cloud and any device?
So it comes a good portion of that is fulfilled essentially by, well, when you look at the cloud, let's see, there are a multitude of public clouds. Many companies have internal clouds. We have seen all of this hyperconvergence, but what has blurred over time are the controls between whether it's a cloud, whether it's the enterprise, whether it's mobile. Again, some of what you've seen over the past 2 days has been how certain technologies can fulfill controls between the enterprise and the cloud. Because, you know, cloud is nimble, it's fast, it's great. At the same time, if you don't control it or don't manage it or don't know what you have in the cloud, which many companies struggle with, your wrist starts to sprawl and you don't even know it's happened. So adding not difficult controls, not what I would call classic gates, but transparency, visibility, and thresholds. You're allowed to do this between here and here. An end user doesn't know those things are happening. Also, weaving analytics into every connection, knowing what that wire is supposed to look like, what that packet is supposed to look like, gives you a heck of a lot more control than we've had for decades.
Yeah, let's go down for our last topic, the notion of better analytics coming off of our systems. Chad, for you and your organization, how would you like to get that visibility in terms of an analytic, a dashboard, a visualization, alerts? What would you like to see happen in terms of that analytics benefit in that network coming to your aid?
Well, it starts with population health and the concept behind it. Population health takes in all the healthcare data and puts it into a data warehouse and leverages analytics to be able to show trends within, kids presenting with asthma or patients presenting with asthma across their lifespan and other triggers. That goes to quality of care. The same concept should be applied to security. So when we bring that data together, all the various logs, all of the various threat vectors and what we're seeing, and not just signatures, but we're able to identify trends and how folks are doing it, how the bad guys are doing it. Are the bad guys single vectored, or have they learned the concept of combined arms like our militaries have? Are they able to put things together to have better impact? And where do we need to put things together to have better protection? We need to change the paradigm so when they show their hand once, it doesn't work anymore. The only way that we can do that is by being able to detect that one time when they show their hand, getting them to do one thing to show how they're going to attack us. And to do that, we have to pull together all the logs, all of the data, and provide analytics and get down to behavior. What is good behavior? What is bad behavior? That's not a signature that you're detecting for malware. That is a behavior pattern. Today I can do one thing, tomorrow I can do it differently. And that's what we need to be able to get to.
Last word, anyone on this analytics and the ability to get information from the intelligence on the network?
Yeah, I would like to say I like the illustration that was just used. And what we're hoping for with the cloud strategy is that when there's an attack on one part of the cloud, even if it's someone else that's in Citrix or another cloud provider, that is shared. Whereas before we've had all these silos that needed to be independently secured. Now the windows that are open in these clouds that we are sharing are going to be ways that we can protect each one from the other, so that when one person attacks Citrix a certain way or Azure a certain way or AWS a certain way, we can close those windows. And what I'd like to see in terms of analytics is, and I'll use kind of a mechanical engineering approach, is I want to know where the windows are open and where the heat loss went or where there was air intrusion. And I would like to see, did it go to an endpoint that wasn't secured or that I didn't know about? I'd like to know more about what I don't know in my analytics. That's really what I want analytics for, because the things that I know well, but I want my analytics to tell me what I don't know yet.
Well, great. Thank you, Craig. I'm afraid we'll have to leave it there. You've been listening to a BriefingsDirect discussion focused on the heightened role of security in the age of global cloud and mobile delivery of apps and data. And we've heard how security concerns increasingly dwarf other architecture considerations, particularly when we take into consideration behavior and the ability to provide a strong and beneficial user experience. We've learned how the advances in thin clients, desktop virtualization, cloud management services, and mobile delivery networks are allowing for both increased security and edge apps performance gains. So please join me now in thanking our guests. We've been here with Stan Black. He's the Chief Security Officer at Citrix. We've also been here with Chad Wilson, Director of Information Security at the Children's National Health System in Washington. Whit Baker, IT Director at the Watershed in Delray Beach, Florida, has been with us. Craig Patterson, the CEO of Patterson Associates in San Antonio, Texas. And lastly, Dan Kaminsky, Chief Scientist at White Ops in San Francisco. Thanks to you all. And a big thank you, too, to our audience for joining this Citrix-sponsored Business Innovation Thought Leadership discussion. I'm Dana Gardner, Principal Analyst at Inter Arbor Solutions, your host and moderator. Thanks again for listening, and do come back next time.